Hello again, and welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. We are starting our first session of the day, our first interview, which is trolling and the future of free speech. It's a big topic at the moment. What is the line between trolling and expressing your opinions? And we have two highly qualified people to talk about this topic today. So let's welcome them to the studio. We have, I can hear myself, sorry. We have Zora and, there you go, sorry. We have Zora Schaad from 20 Minutes. She's the head of community and head of social responsibility board at 20 Minutes. And we have Matthias Strodtkoetter, thank you, I pronounced it right, from Angle Audio, a very exciting startup here in Switzerland. So what I will do is actually, can you introduce yourself briefly, who you are and what you do?
Sure. Should I start?
Sure.
Good. As he said, I'm Zora. I'm working at 20 Minuten. I have 3 functions there. I run the 2 departments. One is One Love, where we do all about human relationships, romantic, sexual, within families, also mental health issues.
Okay.
And then I'm also responsible for the community section, where we try to involve our community and we ask their opinions, we share their stories, and we look after our comment section, which is a very important topic today. We have a team which is qualified, and we try to advise them. We are here in Zurich on the editorial side. And then my 3rd function is I lead the social responsibility board. This is an initiative we founded like 1 year ago in December 2020, and we tried to make our journalism equal, diverse, non-discriminatory. So this is a very unique initiative. I think there is nothing similar in maybe the world or in Europe.
Cool. Yeah. Very good. And the comment section of 20 Minutes of 20 Minuten is a very active place, to say the least, where I am sure you have a lot of experience to share on this topic of trolling and free speech. So we're very excited to have you with us this morning. And then Matthias, can you introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hello. Nice to meet you. I guess I'm Matthias. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Angle Audio. Where Angle Audio is a startup based in Zurich. Some might call us the Swiss answer to Clubhouse. So what we're doing is social audio, and actually we're now completely focusing on social audio as a service.
Okay.
So that's what we're doing. But for over a year, we ran our own social audio platform, where we had over 10,000 users. And let's just say trolling and free speech were also very hot topics in many conversations.
In this past year, okay.
Yeah.
So both of you, when we were preparing questions for this interview, have mentioned that definitely the pandemic has had an impact on comments, on trolling, on this issue. So let's start with you, Zora. How do you think that lockdowns and the pandemic have changed what was happening in the comment section of 20 Minutes?
We have more comments than before.
Okay.
And we have to reject many more comments than we did ever since.
Okay.
And I think in the comment sections, what you see is really the fears and the anger and sorrows of the society. So it's really articulated very clearly in these sections, maybe also a little over-articulated because people feel very free to speech behind their nicknames. They are in the anonymity of the internet. And they search answers. They search someone to blame for the whole pandemic situation. And
Yeah, so you think the pandemic created more sorrows and frustration in society,
absolutely,
which led to more negative comments that you had to moderate in the comment section of 20 Minutes.
Absolutely. I think before the pandemic we had to reject 30% of all comments, and now it's like 40 to 50. So
okay.
Almost half of it. Yeah.
That's a big percentage.
Yeah.
And Matthias, actually before the pandemic, I think we heard very little about social audio. Did your company Angle Audio, did it start with the pandemic, or did it start before and then exploded with a pandemic?
I mean, the idea is older than the pandemic.
Yeah.
So when we decided that that's what we want to build, that was before the pandemic was there.
Yeah.
However, when we started actually really working on it full time, that was when the pandemic was hitting.
Okay.
So yeah.
And how would you say that your platform was affected by the lockdown?
I think generally the pandemic has led to people wanting more social audio.
Yeah.
And I think that has to do with how social audio feels. I think so. What's important to, I guess, understand is how did social audio ever come into existence? Because we have tools like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, you know, you can already talk online, and you could do that for a long time. So what's different about social audio is it came into existence by optimizing the user experience to have these online conversations for fun, like out of enjoyment. And so that's also one big reason why it's mainly audio only, because people are much more relaxed when they're audio only.
And maybe the rise of podcasts also got people familiar with this format of just audio only.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And what this leads to is that the whole experience is basically optimized for enjoyment. That leads to people doing that in their free time. Like we've done user research, and it turns out they're doing it on their couch.
So you've optimized it for enjoyment, but now let's talk about the people who are ruining the party.
Yes. That's the part I wanted to come to.
Okay.
And so to keep it short, because it's optimized for enjoyment, people do it in their free time. They're generally relaxed.
Yeah.
So when people are there, they're relaxed, and then they hear real human voices of other people.
Yeah.
And then, yes, trolling is an issue, but it's very much smaller in social audio.
Okay.
So you do have issues, but surprisingly, like 99 times out of 100, you can just put 50 people into an audio room and they will behave. So that's, I guess, a bit of a phenomenon in the online world.
So do you think that people feel more scared to express these negative emotions and opinions if their voice are on the line rather than if they are just writing a comment? Then they are maybe more prone to just vent their anger because it feels maybe less accountable?
I think it's probably a combination. On the one hand, these audio rooms, they always feel surprisingly intimate. So you come in there and then people have like an intimate personal conversation, and it just feels so wrong to do something wrong when people are having such a conversation. Yeah. And then the other thing is that, you know, people are going to hear your real voice. And I think that just makes you that much less anonymous. Yeah. So
Zora, you've mentioned that you're moderating roughly between 40 and 50% of comments. It is a very, very high percentage. What do you think? Let's explore a little bit. What is in your opinion, the limit between letting users express themselves and guarantee their free speech and abuse? How do you deal with this question when you're creating policies and when you're working with your team for comment moderation?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and it's very difficult. It's easy to say freedom of speech ends where people are discriminated, where they are violated, where there is maybe call for violence, threats. But in fact, it's much more difficult. So we're always training together. We're like working on examples we have, and we maintain a network of around 40 Swiss leading NGOs with which are experts on their fields, like maybe racism, anti-Semitism, sexual harassment, and so on. And sometimes we also call them and ask them for their opinion, how they would react. And that's how we try to get better and better. And sometimes also our journalists are really threatened by our in the comment sections, and then we advise and we take contact with our legal service, and we sometimes charge them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes it can get quite far.
Yeah. The comment section should be like a living room. You should talk, you should like maybe also fight, but always with decency. So that's the border.
Yeah. And you, Matthias, how do you draw the line on angle?
I mean, it's difficult. It's definitely difficult to draw the line. I think it's probably very hard to have like a definite rule, like this is the line. And then what makes it additionally difficult for example, social audio is that it's live. So if people are talking and then someone says something wrong, it's out there. So you can't, you can't have, a system where first you're going to listen to what they want to say and then you can green light it or red light it.
Right.
But it's live.
Yeah.
So if people say something wrong, it's out there. So basically, for us, the main thing is reacting.
Yeah.
And so, we have to react as fast as possible. And first of all, we have to find out that things are happening that are wrong. So we give all the users all the tools to report each other and do things.
So is that how that works? Because you cannot. Actually, and this is also a question for Zora, because it's hard to monitor every article that's published on 20 minutes. But maybe this is what you're doing. So you have tools to, it's users who are saying, hey, I'm offended. I think this comment is offensive. It shouldn't, or this conversation is offensive. How do you organize that?
You mean we?
Yeah.
How we decide what is beyond the line and what isn't?
No. How? So you just mentioned users. Do you have also a team of people monitoring conversations?
Yes. So we try to be, whenever conversations are happening, we try to have at least one person on alert, basically.
Yeah.
And then that person can react as fast as possible.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there have been so many big tech companies trying to solve this with technology. And so far, none of them has succeeded. I think especially Facebook, I think as far as I know, they had like the biggest initiative to try to solve it through technology.
Yeah.
And even they have given up. Like even Facebook now has a couple thousand people just monitoring stuff.
Yeah, so it needs a human intervention.
Yeah.
How about you, Zora? So first of all, Matthias was mentioning that sometimes somebody says something and then we have to react because it's happening live. How is it on 20 minutes? Are the comments first published and then you have to react, or do they go through a filtering first before they are published?
It depends on the topic. There are some
That's
topics.
interesting.
It depends on topics. There are some topics we know that people are really it's like provocating hate, maybe. So if we write about, if we have a focus in an article on women or on foreigners, on LGBTQ people,
Yeah.
football is also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, soccer is also.
Maybe
hot topic.
the derby match a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, maybe. So then we have a so-called high-risk talk pack.
Okay.
Where really every comment is moderated by human beings. So not only an algorithm, but we also work with an algorithm. It's a combination of both.
So you have both?
Yeah.
Okay. So does it mean that you have to scan what is being published every day for hot topics?
Yeah.
And then decide how you're going to have to handle each and every conversation?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we have like 20 persons which work 7 days a week from 6 in the morning to midnight, or 10 to midnight, depends on the weekday.
Yeah.
And they are working in 2-hour shift, and after 2 hours they are really wasted. So they have to, do something completely different or keep silent for an hour.
Okay.
This is a really tough job.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned that online calls for a lot of negative opinion. And this calls for the question is, how seriously do we need to take the trolls? Aren't they just a representation of a minimal part of society, and they're making a lot of noise and they're making an impact on people? For example, I've had to stop reading the comment section on YouTube, or even I have to say it's 20 Minuten, because it's just, it can get quite aggressive. But I started to ask myself how representative these people are. Do you think it's important to pay attention to what's going on in the comments? Is it a good pulse of society, and how? Or do we need to just ignore it and filter out the craziest comments?
It is of course, like it reflects society, yes, but it's also maybe aggravated or, as I said, you're in the anonymity and you can hide a little bit. So it's maybe louder than it really is. But we take the topic very serious because this community thing is like a unique selling point of 20 minutes. So the topic is very serious for us, and we really try to provide a space where everybody can express themselves without being threatened or discriminated. We don't take every troll very serious. Somehow, yes, sometimes, as I said, we also contact our legal service, but like in general, you have to also, our moderators, they have to somehow arrange with all that hate, and they cannot break down every time they work, so. Yeah, the topic is very serious, but not every of the writers. Yeah.
And by the way, I just would like to say to the audience that they can participate in the discussion, they can ask questions, and we will ask them live. We have a very nice comment from Hannes saying, "Chapeau to Zora and your team for the amazing work that you do," because it is a very active section, comment section on 20 minutes. Now let's maybe try to explore some positive stories. I mean, do you have examples of a conversation that started in an aggressive manner and was turned around and had a positive outcome for both? So let's start with Matthias and then Zora, if you have an example as well.
Yeah, maybe like a story from last week. Last week, there was a discussion about should you get vaccinated or not. And so this was a company, not us, a different company hosting this room. And that this was even their first room that they were doing. And we were like, oh my God, this is, you're going all in on the first one.
Risk takers.
Yes, but they were like, no, we're professional moderators and we're gonna take it on. And they did. And it turned out to be a really good conversation in the end. There were really people in there with put the polar opposite opinions, like you have.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were having an actual conversation. I think it's so difficult to have your super extreme polar opinion and just shout it out there when you're basically in a room with people. Like, people don't do that.
So actually people listening to each other and not just defending their opinion just for the sake of it.
And then maybe a different aspect, this isn't completely angle related, but I think there's also kind of almost like a beautiful you could say if you do trolling without malicious intent, it's a bit like performance art or something. So I think there are very funny and creative things happening with trolling sometimes. And I think what's now happening is that trolling starts having like real economic impact. Because if you look at, for example, meme stocks, so there's like this gigantic community online on Reddit, especially the Wall Street bets community. It's like, I don't know the number, it's like 30 million people in there. And basically they're trolling the stock market.
Yes.
And they're making tons of money, and hedge funds are losing tons of money.
And some went bankrupt.
And that to me feels kind of like Robin Hood kind of story. So I think you can, kind of the technique of trolling, you can use it for good or for art or for fun. Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Zora? Do you have an example of a discussion that was super heated, that you knew already from the topic it was going to get a little crazy, and then it ended up being a positive experience for everybody in the end?
Well, maybe not super heated, but what I noticed several times, if we have stories about if we have somebody describing their fate, like maybe chronic illness, mental illness, or accidents, I don't know, like really hard fates, and then we open the comment section and there are haters, they are laughing maybe, and if we reject those comments, then the discussion gets really very positive, very beautiful somehow, because they are helping each other, they share their own experience, they give advice, where can you maybe seek help, and so this is really what's encouraging to me and my team.
Okay. Yeah. In his introduction to the conference, Harry was talking about his luck to have been working with the internet since the 90s, okay? So since it started, and being the same age as Harry, I definitely remember the hopeful beginnings of the internet. Everybody was going to have a voice. It was going to be the democracy of opinions, and finally we wouldn't be controlled by people who want to try to censor our messages. Now that, 30 years down the line, and you as people who have had to deal with opinions that you've had to shut down, do you think there is a value to let everybody talk, or actually there are some people that they need to be censored because it's counterproductive?
Want to start?
I think generally and obviously some things should be, moderated. They should not be, some stuff is just illegal or inherently bad, and that stuff is not good. But generally, I'm actually kind of a strong believer in a high degree of free speech. Yeah. And I think also difficult topics are best treated as honestly and openly as possible. There's this word called sunshining, like just getting stuff into the open, into the light, for people to actually see it and actually talk about it. And I feel like many things are solved much better that way than to just try to kind of suppress the discussion around it. Yeah. So, yeah, and I think, yes, you have to moderate. Yes, you have to do these things. It's very important. If you hear what Zora is saying, yes, of course it's important to do this. But at the same time, I also have a bit of a feeling that kind of in society, to me, it feels like we're getting a bit too comfortable with censoring things that we don't like as opinions. Okay. And I think that's overall not a good thing. I think difficult topics, if in doubt, I'd rather have them debated openly than just say, no, we're not talking about this, or your opinion is not welcome here. And yeah, I think as a society, it feels to me sometimes we're getting a bit too comfortable with kind of just wanting to see the world as we see it, and we wanting people to believe what we believe. And yeah, so I think more honest, open debate actually would be good.
Okay. And what about you, Zora? Because you're also head of a responsibility board who's trying to promote a positive vision on certain topics, and you're probably encountering users who are going against the work that you're trying to do. So how do you deal with this tension?
Well, I basically agree with you. I think it's very important to let people speak and express themselves. And yes, maybe it's easier to do this online than in public. But if they can't hold back their impulses, it's really uncomfortable situation for everybody. And that's our aim, that people don't feel uncomfortable, that they are not threatened or discriminated. So that's like the tension line. And I think we need kind of a common ground if we want to talk together or also fight together, which is like our terms of or rules of conduct, how you have to behave. But also maybe you can't argue on a completely fact-free basis. So we also began in this pandemic to try to moderate a little bit fake news. So everybody is allowed to say, for instance, I'm afraid of vaccination. I think it's a bad thing, and technology is new and stuff. That's okay, but you can't say, you're not allowed to say, vaccination brings hundreds of millions of persons to the hospital. So if you write this, we will reject it. So that's what I mean with the kind of a common ground, respect, but also facts, kind of a fact. Yeah,
very important.
Fact basis.
Okay. Now, we mentioned that the pandemic has changed things for you and also has increased users for Angle. So I would say, as a second to last question, because we actually have a question from the chat after. So my last question is, now that things are we're not completely back to normal, but it's definitely not the situation that it was a year ago. You said you saw an increase in comments and in negative comments. Now, has it decreased a little bit? Are we back to what it was before, or this trend of having to moderate 40 to 50% of comments, is it still going on?
I think it's still going on.
Yeah, still going on.
Yeah. But I mean, the situation is not over. Now the whole vaccination thing,
True.
and we have to vote end of November about the COVID-Gesetz, so it's still a very hot topic.
Yeah. And Matthias, actually the question from the chat is related. Martina is asking, so you grew a lot during the pandemic, but who's your audience today? Okay, and who do you expect to join the space of social audio?
Actually, so today we're not running our own platform anymore. So today we're completely focusing on social audio as a service. So basically we're enabling websites and apps to have their own social audio. For example, last week we launched with 20 minutes, the first social audio room on 20 minutes.
Okay.
And so basically in that context, our audience is the audience of 20 minutes. But we're doing it for all kinds of companies and for their audiences. Like newspapers, there are lots of newspapers or media companies in general who want to get, a really good conversation experience into their products. And I think that's great, but there's also, language learning, skill learning, meditation, anything that could profit from building a community. Yeah. So basically, our audiences are their audiences.
So Zora, there's now angle conversations for 20 minutes, so maybe more conversations to moderate. Your team's gonna be busy. So anyway, thank you so much, both of you, for joining this conversation. And we have a great conclusion in our chat from Tom. He says, and he's repeating what one of you said, you cannot solve a social issue with an algorithm. I think it's a great way to conclude this interview. Thank you for joining us. We will be back in 3 minutes at 10:15 for some more information about the new joint venture between TX Market and Scott24. Stay tuned. See you back at 10:15.